I don't really know how I want to start this off. I guess let's just address the obvious question first, because it's like kind of the polite thing to do. Why would you listen to me? It's actually a question that I ask myself quite regularly. Usually when I'm staring at a contact sheet that I made, wondering how I missed like the one and only shot that I really needed. And I start to feel like I should just stop doing this. My hair's a mess. I just woke up. Let's be honest, there's no shortage of photographers and educators and writers, and especially men, with some sort of opinion that they think needs to be written down on a keyboard. This market is very saturated. And it kind of feels like everybody has this sort of framework or a course, some sort of master class. And they also have like this incredible way of coming off as undoubtful, like they're just so unfamiliar with doubt. So any type of skepticism you have about listening to the things that, I want to talk about, it's kind of actually encouraged. I don't expect you to just follow me. I don't have a system that guarantees you success in photography. But in all honesty, if I did, why would you trust that? I'm 25 years old. Especially if you're, older than me, I'm sure you're probably thinking, what does this kid know about photography? And in the grand scheme of things, I don't know how much I know. I know that I know a lot, but I know that there's always room for more. I may not have it all figured out, but what I do have is something far less impressive and a lot harder to market. And that's the fact that I've done everything in my life the hard way. And I've got a long history of staying when it would be much easier to let things go. And I have a habit of paying attention to things when nothing is going on and caring an unreasonable amount about a medium that could give two shits whether or not I'm here or not. So, if there's one thing that I hope you take from anything that I do here on this channel, I hope it's not inspiration in the sort of motivational sense. I'm not really interested in making you feel briefly energized and permanently unchanged. What I really hope to be is useful, to be able to provide either new artists, middle stage artists, wherever you are in your journey as a photographer, a sort of visual language to help you describe the things that you feel as an artist and as a photographer, to remind you that confusion in this craft and in this medium isn't a personal failure, and more so that it's a sign that the attention that you give to the world is starting to pay off. Photography has given me a life that I think I'll forever be grateful for. It's helped me see things about the world and about people and about systems and power and love and intimacy and kindness and hatred in ways that I don't think that I would ever experience if I wasn't a photographer. It's fundamentally changed who I am. And if I can just help one person that has that itch to see the world in the same way, more deliberately, more honestly, then listening to anything that I have to say might feel a little bit more tolerable. But if not, at least I was honest with you from the start. Hi, my name is Jared Thomas Tapey. I'm a social documentary photographer and educator here in New York City, and you're watching my YouTube channel. Across my social media platforms, I've created 5 segments: crafting a photograph, life through the lens, marks of the maker, the creative connection, and tools of the trade. Each of these segments has been designed to talk about what I think are each unique element of photography. Today's episode is from my segment, Marks of the Maker, the series dedicated to my own personal philosophies, principles, and moments that have shaped my creative identity, and hopefully what you can learn from them. As I said before, my name is Jared Thomas Tapey. I'm a photographer, writer, and an educator, which is really to say that I spend an inordinate amount of time walking around the streets with a camera and wondering why I'm doing that in the first place. Then writing long explanations to justify it to myself and occasionally to other people. In my own personal life, I really like to understand why I'm doing something, if I'm going to do it. And if you're going to potentially, be learning anything from these lessons, I figured that I needed to give you at least a little bit of background on who I am and why you should care. Not that you should care. Why listen? So I'm going to drop a little lore for you on my background. My relationship with photography started very early. I'm talking like 6 years old early. This was my first camera. My mom got it for me. I don't really know why. I think she just wanted me to have a camera. At that age, I wasn't thinking about composition or lighting or storytelling. I was just kind of curious. I pointed the camera at things around me and pressed the shutter because something about the moment just kind of felt worth remembering. Maybe it was cool, I don't know. When I was 10, my mother got her own camera, a Nikon Coolpix, and it shortly after became my camera. I was hooked, in every sense of the word. I couldn't put the camera down. I brought it with me everywhere. I loved it. From that point on, it was like photography became a way for me to document the world around me, all of my friends and my family, and the things that I was seeing, the places that I would frequent when I grew up. But I don't think that I knew at the time what it truly meant to me. I didn't have the visual literacy or the vernacular to kind of talk about why I liked what I was doing. But looking back on it now, I realized that those were kind of the first steps in realizing that photography wasn't just about taking pictures. It was about paying attention. As I got older, photography got a little bit more serious. I entered into high school at 13, and throughout my time in high school, I started the photography club. And it started to feel like photography was something that I didn't just enjoy doing. It was something that I wanted to understand on a deeper level. Starting that club was really just about having a space for people that were interested in photography. And, we discussed things like the mechanical side of photography. We discussed photographers and photographs that we found interesting. We gave people assignments to go out and shoot and try new things. And again, kind of looking back on it now, I feel like that was really the groundwork for realizing what I wanted to do with my life was not only be a photographer, but be able to teach photography. When I was 16, I started to document New York City. I feel like New York City has a way of reshaping the world as a photographer. It's the pace of the city, the people. It's the unpredictability about what can happen on any given day. And taking photos here in New York City was kind of like a training ground for not only who I was becoming as an artist, but for who I was as a person. Everything that I had learned up until this point had all been from a YouTube university education. I was just fascinated with photography enough to want to study it on my own. And I used that to also document the beaches down in Florida, which I thought was going to be maybe my first book when I was that young. I think documenting the beach towns down in Florida taught me a lot about color, and it taught me a lot about light. And I think that throughout each moment of my life as a photographer, each place that I've gone and visited and worked in has taught me something that the last place wasn't able to teach me. When I was 19, I moved out to California. A year after graduating high school, I had the opportunity at a summer internship at a company called Specialized Bicycle Components, which is, they race in Tour de France every year. I was a part of their global marketing team, and I got to see firsthand how literally $1 billion company works. This was also at the same time that I started my first year of university. I knew that I wanted to pursue something in photography, 100%. And at the time, all of my friends were telling me that it was a terrible idea, and I kind of got made fun of a lot in high school for being a photographer and taking it so seriously. But photography has given me more than I could ever possibly imagine. It's really kind of how I met my girlfriend. At the time in high school, she was the editor of the yearbook, and I was a journalist for the yearbook. We had known each other prior, but I feel like it was within that time period that we really got to know each other. So not only has photography given me a life of understanding the world around me, but it's also given me the opportunity to be with somebody for the rest of my life that thinks the same way that I do and has introduced me to an amazing person. She moved to Savannah, Georgia to start her college, and I moved out to California to start my education. And it was within that first year of education that I learned a completely different side of photography that I hadn't explored before. And that's partly to do with the fact that I was working for a commercial company and taking my first year of education as seriously as I could. But I learned things like commercial work and marketing and brand storytelling and how to work as a team. And I learned all of the technical components of photography within that first year of education and spending time at that internship. I was quite literally across the country from everybody that I had known in my family and friends, and I was living in a internship house with 6 other people in the middle of nowhere in Morgan Hill, California, which is just wine country. I was 19 years old. All the other roommates were engineers, a part of the engineering internship that Specialized offered. The next youngest person was 25, and I was 19 years old, and the only creative person in that house. So needless to say, it was a very lonely experience. So I would spend every day at work, and I would stay in the studio till about 2 a.m. in the morning, finishing out schoolwork because I just didn't want to go home. Any free time that I got, I spent outside, spending all of my money on Ubers to get to the BART train in San Jose that was about 45 minutes away, so that I could take an hour-and-a-half train ride if I caught the express train up to San Francisco. It was here in California that I think I took the most influential class that I could have possibly taken at university, and mainly because I feel like I didn't learn anything after my freshman year of university. I did kind of feel like my education was a little bit of a waste. That's just the reality of it. And I think that that's because what university is really good at is turning you into a professional, making sure that you can go into a career field that you like. But hardly any of it had to do with the artistic side of photography. And that's what I was interested in. I wasn't interested in commercial photography as much. I had understood all the technical aspects of it due to some classes and having real world experience in my internship, but that's not what I was hoping to do. That first year I took a history of photography class, and that just about changed my life, I think. I became obsessed with the medium in a way that I don't know if many other people can possibly understand. I was in it. I was studying as much as I possibly could about the history of photography, about learning from photographers. And, at 19 years old, I was young and impressionable, and I wanted to be able to do the things that I saw these other photographers doing. So I emulated them. And I think that that's really obvious in my work in California. I was really, really into people like William Eggleston, like Stephen Shore or Ansel Adams, all of these very prominent photographers that, all of these courses kind of teach. I had never seen landscapes like this before, I had never seen mountains like this before. I had never visited the West Coast. It was a complete anomaly to me. But looking back at that 19-year-old being interested in photography, I knew right then and there that after taking that history of photography class that was what I wanted to do. After California, I moved to Savannah, Georgia to close the gap between me and my girlfriend. I was tired of it. We had spent the first 3 years of our relationship in a long distance relationship, and I didn't want to be away from her anymore. And plus, I had gone to visit Savannah, Georgia the moment that she got accepted into her university, and I liked it. It was quiet and it was calm, and it was very different from what I was used to. But it was there in Savannah, Georgia, where I feel like my work really started to take shape. Savannah, Georgia is where I started my first long-term documentary project, and it's where I made my first book. The city of Savannah is, much like New York, an incredibly historic city, and it's layered with culture and architecture, tourism, and a lot of economic contrasts. And from the moment that I visited Savannah, Georgia the first time, I noticed those economic contrasts. What started out as just an observation became a 4-year-long project documenting the environment of the city of Savannah and the ways in which lower income communities and people of color communities were being pushed out of their own neighborhoods for the benefit of larger corporations. These communities literally helped build Savannah, Georgia, and they're a prominent piece of what makes up the culture of the city of Savannah. And much like here in New York, the gentrification of Savannah, Georgia was a huge issue during the time period that I was shooting there. The city of Savannah became the first place that I realized the responsibility of the photographer. I, as a white man, was entering into these communities of color and of culture, and many times I was the only person that looked like me in those communities, and it took me about 2 years to get recognized within that community. And I think it really started when I met the District 5 City Commissioner, Miss Tanya Milton. Miss Tanya is fantastic. She, at the time, I don't think she does anymore, I haven't seen anything, but at the time she ran the oldest newspaper in the city of Savannah, Georgia, and it's how I got my start in photojournalism. She and one other woman was running the Savannah Tribune. I went in there to ask for a job. They didn't have the money to pay me, and I told her that I would work for her at any capacity. Her and I had a very long conversation. I got to understand the history of Savannah, Georgia through her and the people within the communities that I was looking to document. Spending 4 years in the city of Savannah, Georgia, photographing it taught me a very, very valuable lesson that I now teach here. And it's that making something meaningful takes time. You can't just parachute into some place and expect to understand it and then dip out. You have to stay. You have to walk the same streets repeatedly. You have to observe patterns and rhythms and talk to people and show face. All of these things only reveal themselves over time. The city of Savannah became my photographic foundation. 100%, without a doubt. It's also where I got my start in photojournalism. Like I said, I started already doing documentary work, and I wanted to try something a little bit different during that time period. So I was very into photojournalism from a super young age. I looked at images from people like Kevin Carter and Gordon Parks and Walker Evans and everybody at the FSA Foundation, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do that to some capacity while still entertaining the world of street photography and documentary photography. So I went out looking for a job. The first one that I found was the Savannah Tribune, where I met Miss Tanya. They were the oldest and they didn't have a budget. So I went to the biggest in the city of Savannah, which was the Savannah Morning News. I think the ways in which I was able to seize those opportunities was because I didn't just send in an email and I didn't just send a link. I printed out my portfolio and I went in person with a resume and my portfolio and asked to talk to the directors of photography, and I landed an interview. I got to cover a few stories, but then I quickly realized that I had a lot of growing up to do. I was 20 years old, and the deadlines were difficult for me at 20 years old, still going to university online. I was working a regular job. I couldn't cut it. In all honesty, I couldn't cut it at first. But I had already kind of been bitten by the bug, and I knew that at some point I would return to it. It was also during those years that I started my YouTube channel, doing what I'm doing now at a much less professional grade quality. I was recording with my phone for a mic because I didn't have a mic. It was tough times. But there's videos on here of some of the footage that I had from shooting in Savannah, Georgia, that I titled The Search, when I was in search of the photographs that I was making for my first book. During my time as a photojournalist, I got to cover some fun stories. The work that I did as a photojournalist in Savannah, Georgia is much different from the work that I do now as a photojournalist. I got to cover a lot of really great heartfelt stories about, children at cancer hospitals that were receiving a fundraiser and a big Valentine's Day event, a marathon. The first big event that I got to shoot was the St. Patrick's Day parade down in the city of Savannah, Georgia, which, if you don't know, it's a big deal down there. That was the first big event that I shot as a photojournalist. And then the second big one was the Savannah Jazz Festival that I got to shoot because of Miss Tanya Milton at the Savannah Tribune. And I think it was there that I really got to understand the people that were actually a part of the community in the city of Savannah, Georgia. I was introduced to a lot of very important people there within the communities that I was already working with. And so being able to show face really allowed me to kind of open myself up and become comfortable around the communities that I was photographing. And that's where I kind of got known from. But it was also around those years that were extremely transformative for me as well. I was still attending college, but I felt like I wasn't really learning anything. So I was diving into photography head first, kind of reading about it as much as I could and watching interviews from other photographers. Really, I got my education more so on how I see the world from books and from understanding other photographers. During those years, the camera went with me absolutely everywhere. Any type of traveling that I did, which was very minimal, road trips. I went and visited Kentucky and I shot in Kentucky for a weekend. Photography became less about projects and it became more of like a habit. Wherever I went, the camera was right there. And I think that it's during this time period that those photographs started to gradually build an archive of understanding the medium. Then my girlfriend got what we call a big girl job after she completed college, and we moved into Brooklyn, and I could go back to documenting the streets of New York City. I knew that I had always wanted to do that after starting it back in 2016. But by that point, the way that I was shooting was very different. I had worked in slow cities. I had worked in the city of Savannah, Georgia for 4 years. And it took me a long time to get acclimated to that and not the rush of everything. Coming back to document New York City meant that I had to change as a photographer again, and I had to change as a person again. But I knew that I wanted a book here in New York City, multiple books, because we're never leaving New York City again. And so I came up with the idea of Souls in an Urban Landscape, and I think that it kind of stemmed from the fact that I think one of the qualities of myself is that I care so deeply about people, and I care so deeply about the city of New York and what it means to people and what it has always meant to me. Is the fact that there are millions of ways and walks of life that you can't find anywhere else in the world, really. And so I started shooting for my book, Souls in an Urban Landscape, and I've been working on that for the past 5 years. The book itself is going to be focused on the people and the rhythm and the environments that shape daily life here in New York City. Street photography and portraits and moments of routine and labor and good times and bad times and the way that people interact with one another and the idea of human connection or lack thereof, moments of tension or quiet humanity inside one of the more intense cities in the world. And so I started walking miles upon miles every day, especially during the summer. Usually during the spring and summer, I walk about 20 miles a day, starting off at 145th Street, either east or west in Harlem, and then walking down to Battery Park. And throughout my time here photographing the city again so far, I think the big portion of what I learned in the city of Savannah, Georgia was the act of returning and staying within communities and allowing the city to kind of reveal itself slowly. And that body of work will eventually become my second book. New York is an interesting place to be a photographer because the city has absolutely no interest in things like your personal brand or your origin story or how aligned you might feel that week. New York really only cares about one thing. And it's the advice that I give to people who always ask me about moving to New York City. It's that New York City will give you whatever you give it. However much you put into the city is how much the city will give back to you. You know, things like gentrification are a big issue here, and it's kind of like what I based my whole first book on, is the idea of gentrification in these communities that are slowly disappearing. And it's prominent in the ways that I shoot here in the city. I want to be able to capture the way that the city is right now, so that way when we look back 20 years from now and it's all completely gone and it's all different, you know, there is a photographic evidence of what the city was like to live here. And I'm willing to spend the next 20 years documenting the city and what it feels like to live here in this moment, in these tense times, and show people that there are still moments within these tense times that are inseparable from what humanity should be, and that's connection. Alongside all of the personal work, I've also become a photojournalist as well. I am a member of the NPPA, which is the National Press Photographers Association, and I've been covering protests and parades and spot news and anything in between. All of these moments in which the city comes alive with people all doing the same thing at the same time. These environments are incredibly dynamic, and it's incredibly fun to shoot these things. I love being a photojournalist. They reveal how communities organize, how they express themselves and respond to social issues. And I really think that photographing these moments has become a very important part of my work here in the city, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. Now, by this point, it's obvious I take photographs. But in my eyes, that's the least interesting part of the process, because the camera for me has always just been an extension of myself. I think what defines me is my routines and my process, habits, both good and bad. I have a very dedicated habit of asking myself questions about why I do what I do, or what I'm doing, and why does it matter? And I think what ties it all together is a very specific type of visual language that I've identified for myself. And that's a set of commitments that I've learned the hard way. Patience over urgency, and ethics over aesthetics, and some sort of clarity over performance. I'm much less interested in photographs that kind of announce themselves loudly. And I'm much more interested in photographs that might make sense years later from now. I want to create images and photographs that hold up once all the excitement is kind of worn off. I do social media, yeah, but I think that that's just because it's kind of like what the times require. I'm much more interested in completing books and making books. And I feel like that's why the photographs that I take have to stand on their own, not just for social validation on Instagram. The idea of teaching And the capacity that I do it today became something that came a little bit later. I know I said earlier that I started doing this stuff on YouTube when I was like 19 or 20 years old. And it's not that I feel like I'm qualified, but I just saw something that was lacking from the online education space and really just the whole education space of photography. You know, when I was growing up teaching myself photography on YouTube, everything was so technical. Everything was about gear reviews and the new camera equipment and all of the settings and Lightroom presets. And yeah, that stuff is incredibly important and you should absolutely know the technical aspects of photography. I mean, I am very well versed in the technical aspects of photography, but I didn't learn all of those things because I thought that they would make me, you know, something better. It was more so because I needed to be able to have the camera be an extension of my eye, not worry about the technical aspects of photography. Really what it was that I kept asking myself the same question over and over and over again throughout the process of me learning photography. And it was, why is everything so focused on gear and the tactics of photography? Why isn't anybody teaching anything about things like the ethics of photography or the artistic side of photography? I didn't want to just become a better photographer in a technical sense. I wanted to become a better artistic photographer and understand who I am as a person through the craft of photography. But very little attention gets paid to the interior life of the artist. I wanted to change that because I was always asking myself those questions: who I am and what does this work mean, and you know, how does this affect people? So I started teaching all of the things that I learned from personal experience about what it means to be an artist and a photographer and to be connected to people that you're photographing. How do you think as a photographer? How do you stay curious without chasing trends? And especially as social media evolved, how do you build a creative life that isn't completely enclosed by an algorithm? And those types of questions rarely ever show up in some sort of tutorial on photography. But these questions shape everything about who you are as a person and as an artist. Teaching, for me, became a way to explore these questions publicly and a way for me to connect with people that wanted to be better artists, not just professional photographers. I really wanted to be able to help people realize that there is a lot of uncertainty that comes with any form of art, but especially here in the photographic medium, and that really, with the type of work that I do as a street photographer, a social documentary photographer, a photojournalist, it rarely has to do with the technical aspects of photography and more so about how attentive you are. I wanted to be able to provide people with a community that wanted to learn about photography and the ethics and help people understand their own visual language and help people understand their unique vision and voice. Because photography has taught me the most important lessons about life that nothing else has. It's taught me how to stay and be attentive and be caring and empathetic. And the idea that staying doesn't come with applause. It's just you, just still there, long after a lot of the novelty is worn off. And I feel like that's very rare nowadays in this algorithmic social media world that just rewards immediacy. To me, photography is a long apprenticeship in resisting the urge to leave the moment something stops flattering you. And maybe that's why I care so much about it. Because photography and teaching are two of the things that I've found that don't let you lie to yourself for very long. They reveal your habits and your assumptions and your attention, and over time, they reveal who you're becoming. If you spend any amount of time with me this year through paragraphs on my Substack or here on YouTube or short lessons that I teach on my other social medias, I hope that you don't become more impressive. The world already has plenty of impressive people who are deeply confused about who they are. Instead, I hope that you become more deliberate. I hope that you learn that confusion isn't failure, that patience isn't passive, and that photography isn't just about making images. It's about knowing how to move through the world with care and curiosity and compassion. It's about taking accountability for the work that you're committed to. So if you're willing to stay with the work too, then I'm glad you're here. And again, you don't have to listen to a word that I say. I'm still learning, just like everybody should still be learning. But if I'm able to help at least one person, then I feel like I'm doing my job and I feel useful. Okay guys, that's gonna be it for this video. I hope that you learned a little bit about me and understand where I'm coming from as a, a potential educator and as an artist and everything like that. You can find me on here on YouTube, on Instagram at Jared Tapey, on TikTok at Jared Thomas Tapey _, on Substack at The Creative Connection, where there will be a coordinating article with this lesson. Yeah, that's it. I hope that this didn't come off as pretentious. I didn't want it to be like a pick-me thing. I just wanted to provide some context. If you're, a few of the last videos that I've made have done pretty well, and people have been asking for more videos, and I'm extremely excited to start taking YouTube a little bit more seriously instead of Instagram, because it's longer form and I can actually talk. But I just wanted to be able to provide some context about who I am and my journey, and, hopefully connect with people on why I care so much about the medium of photography and why I care so much about the future of photography and the people within it. Yeah, thanks for watching if you made it this far. I think that all that's left is to get out there and get shooting. All right, see you on the next one.